So Awakening to the Path is some subtitle that we would like to share. And I must say that all what we have to say tonight is a joint effort from our small group over here. We are about 12 people and we meet every week, and half online and half in person. And about a year ago, the request came that we should study the voice of the silence. And in our group, we have a lot of mutual trust and encouragement, and we support each other. So when we think about having confidence on the path, I think it's so great that we have evolved our circles to include people online so that everyone is capable and have the possibility of joining online. Our aim in our group has been to try and make very, very metaphysical treatise, like the Voice of the Silence is, somewhat comprehensible and applicable in daily life. So we will share in all simplicity a little bit of the ideas that we have studied over this year. Our aim has been that each night when we leave the meeting, we should have something to try for the week until we come back again. We also see each other as continuing this journey in the next incarnations. So we are connecting not only for this incarnation, but for lives to come. Let's see if I can get it going. So could you please read this?
Yes, here. Kamadeva. This is from the Rig Veda. Desire first arose in it, which was the primal germ of mind, and which sages, searching with their intellect, have discovered in their heart to be the bond which connects entity with non-entity.
And this, we could say, is the essence of the spiritual path, as we have heard Jerry express so beautifully, to connect entity and non-entity. To see that this spiritual impulse, which makes the whole universe manifest, and for the spirit to explore itself through the manifold forms, this is exactly the same process that is being initiated in us when we wake up to the path. Now, the voice of the silence is probably those whisperings of Buddhi that Jerry was mentioning. The whisperings of Buddhi, you could say, is the reminiscence or the soul memory from past lives that we wake up to hear, not only as the voice of conscience, but also when we start our spiritual path. Something in us that sort of merges out and wants to reach up to the spiritual essence of ourselves. I may ask you to read this one as well, Joe.
From the Voice of the Silence. Within thy body, the shrine of thy sensations, seek in the impersonal for the eternal man, and having sought him out, look inward. Thou art Buddha.
It's such a beautiful statement. And, of course, we all know that we already are what we're trying to achieve. But somehow there are obstacles getting in the way. So we cannot truly express our Buddha nature on this plane. So the path has a lot to do with moving from object to subject, not to be looking for the truth outside of ourselves, but subjectifying it, looking inside. And for this we need tools. We have the head doctrine, and the head doctrine sometimes have gotten a very bad reputation. It's all about, intellectual stuff. It's all about metaphysics. It's all about studying. But in order to have confidence on the path and to not lose one's confidence, one needs that head doctrine as a mapping out of the path. Because we need to know what are we going to challengingly face when it comes our way. And then, of course, the heart doctrine is walking the path. Because if we can study until we get blue in our face, we can study metaphysics for lifetimes to come, and nothing will really happen until we try to put it into practice. So the theory is important. So this first part of the talk is going to give a little bit of the theory, very simplified, key cornerstones that we need to have with us in order to be able to keep our confidence on the path. And for those who want to go deeper into this, Jerry has already referred to the 3 fundamentals of the secret doctrine. So we have identity. Who am I? What do I identify with? We have structure. How does this universe work? What laws are governing the universe? I need to know that if I want to develop into a spiritual being. And what purpose is it? What is the purpose of evolution? The purpose of evolution is to bring out that Kammadevik impulse in each sentient being, to activate it so all sentient beings can reach the same realization. So if we start with identity, which Jerry touched upon in many different ways, here's a very simplistic way that we have looked upon it in our small groups. So the highest point of identification that we can imagine is that of being an aspect of the universal consciousness. So there is only one of us, and it is the same in all sentient beings. In order for the spirit to get to know itself, it has to differentiate into matter, into substance. And this is done first through the individuality, which is that sense of continuity and it continues life after life. And then, of course, there is the personal point of identification, which we are most familiar with. And we're going to look a little bit closer to that. So our current point of identification is what in the voice is called the dust in the mirror. Is that dust that hides the true Buddha nature in us. And we call them the modifications of the mind. And what does that mean? Well, our memories is a modification of the mind. It is our use of the mind that either makes us see things as they really are, or just see projections of our own imagination. And if you think about memories, I mean, when you come to this stage in life, you're very happy to have a memory, because when the memory is fading, it's not that easy. But a memory is also a hindrance, because it's conditioned our mind in the way that we look at things. So we nearly never see things as they really are, because we perceive them through the veils of our memories. We also have, as Jerry was pointing out, ketchup or mustard, likes and dislikes. And you can say the whole time, the lower mind is sort of oscillating between its likes and dislikes. And what is triggering the likes and dislikes? Well, those are our senses. And our senses are beautiful tools for experiencing reality on this physical plane. But there are very good servants, but very lousy masters. All our likes and dislikes forms patterns and habits. And we may think of patterns and habits in a static way, but they are actually living elemental fields that we are giving energy to. Each time we think in a certain way or act in a certain way, we are reinforcing those elemental fields. And in a sense, that is the illusory aspect of the personality. It wants to see itself as having a permanent identity. That's the whole illusory aspect of it. And so the patterns, when they break down, creates a chaotic condition within our personality. And we hold on to those patterns, you know, like if it was a question of life and death, which it is in a sense. And that creates and reinforces the idea of separateness, which then stands in the way for being able to perceive and realize our true Buddha nature. So we need somehow to guide the mind in a spiritual direction. And in order to do this, we have to make a shift in our point of identification. Sorry, I should go back here. So would you please read this, Joe?
Yes, of course. From Patanjali's Yoga Aphorisms. Concentration, or yoga, is the hindering of the modifications of the thinking principle.
And so, how are we going to hinder that modifications? We cannot change something that we are identified with. So we have to create a meta perspective for ourselves. And that meta perspective has in many traditions been called the witness position. We have to be able to see and have a meta perspective of our own personality. How am I interacting with other people? How am I interacting with life's different situations? And we can see that this witness position that we start here in this physical, aspect of reality has a gradual awakening that moves us more and more inwards. Because you could, of course, say, well, who is witnessing the witness that witnessed the personality? And this is, going on all the way up all our 7 principles. We need to be able to establish the witness position in all the principles. So let's then take a look at structure. We know that the law of periodicity is inherent in everything that exists. And we look at cycles in nature, and again, we immediately have the tendency to look outside ourselves. But what we need to do is to look inside and to look for those intrapersonal cycles, to learn to see how does our thought patterns work? How does my emotional patterns work? How does my physiobiological patterns work? So that's the only way we can change things, And then we have to look also at the cause and effect. Most of us also have a tendency when we get caught in squeezed situations in life to see the cause to our trouble outside of ourselves. Again, we have to turn the pointer inwards and see that we are causing all our different challenges in life. We are experiencing the effect of what we have created ourselves. Now, the law of karma is also sometimes that we think of it as something outside of ourselves, but it's actually that very Kamadevic essence. One aspect of that is karma that maintains an absolute compassion of balance. And of course, in that spiritual level, cause and effects are one. It is only on our plane of thinking and existing, which is caught in a linear time frame, that we see cause and effect as different. And the same with reincarnation. If we get the question, do we reincarnate or not? Well, that depends what we identify with. There is one aspect of us that is never reincarnating. And then there is the cyclic aspect that is continually reincarnating in order to gain experience and to bring forth that Buddha nature in us. So in our group, we have tried to become practical then. So we have been looking at the 24-hour daily cycle, because that is an important thing that we can train with. And we will see how that leads to the reincarnation cycle. So let's look first at the 24-hour daily cycle. As Jerry was pointing out, it is good before we go to sleep to put the mind to rest. And there are different ways of doing it, of course. We have been following some of the advices that Mr. Judge gives, that is to make a review of the day that has been from the witness position. So no likes and dislikes, just as an observation. And then to try and formulate a spiritual idea, a spiritual question that we will try and hold on to through this whole journey of the 24-hour cycle. So as we move from the waking to the dreaming state, we all know how terribly difficult it is to rest aware and consciously make the transition from waking to dreaming, because we have to cross over or cross through rather what we call the laya point, that point which is neither waking nor dreaming, but it's kind of, in between point, like you could say a homogeneous substance that we have to go through. So we have to be able to carry the witness position through into the dreaming state. And by doing the resume of the day before we put our heads on the pillow, hopefully we will clear up a little bit of those impressions in the dreaming state. And then we again have to transition from the dreaming to the dreamless state. And in the dreamless state, you could say we are experiencing the very essence of our being. And now the question is, how are we going to retain that, to bring it back through the dreaming state, back into the waking state again. And of course, this is a practice that takes lifetimes upon lifetimes. But we have tried to make a start in doing it. And we can see that very soon it forms a kind of pattern if we make it a habit of doing it. And so, for example, we can see if the idea that we gave thought to before going to sleep, can we maintain that? Can we wake up with the same idea? If it has been a symbol that we be focused on, if it has been, a little phrase of the voice of the silence, can we pick up the thread when we wake up? So we make both, a review of what has been during the day, but also what has been during the night. And we can see that when an individual is capable of transitioning these different states of consciousness consciously with awareness from the witness position, then we can also apply that to the cycle of reincarnation. In our incarnated life, we make experience and impressions, just like we do in a day. And then we go through a kind of dreamlike state where the personal selfish desires are being, worked upon. And then we go into the state where we have the spiritual longings and desires that are being integrated into the individuality. And then we can come back and continue our journey. And of course, we know that people like Tulkus in Tibet, for example, or other very advanced Mahatmas can do this transition and come back with a totally perfect consciousness that has no interruption. Now, if we think about the purpose why we're doing this, you say, what is it that motivates me? And this is, of course, a question that we have to ask ourselves on a daily basis, on a minute-to-minute basis. The two paths. So that is the second fragment of the voice, right? So not only do we have to walk the spiritual path, but we also have to realize that at the end it is twofold. And the whole second fragment of the voice of the silence, as we know, brings up this topic. And extremely simplified, we have liberation and we have renunciation. Now, liberation is the being that has renounced all material desires, but still have a desire for spiritual longing or bliss of nirvana. Renunciation is someone who refuses to enter nirvana because of the realization of what we call the bodhisattvic path. A bodhisattva is someone who has come to the insight that samsara and nirvana are opposite poles of the same, and so has transcended both in order to stay on and help mankind. And this I will ask Joe to read again, please.
The Kuan Yin Pledge. Never will I seek nor receive private individual salvation. Never will I enter into final peace alone. But forever and everywhere will I live and strive for the redemption of every sentient being throughout the world from the bonds of conditioned existence.
And could you please read this as well, Joe?
From the Aphorisms on Karma by W.Q. Judge. Changes may occur in the instrument during one life as to make it appropriate for a new class of karma. This may take place through intensity of thought and the power of a vow.
So let's look at the occult aspect of taking a vow. When we take the Kuan Yin pledge or something similar, what we do is that we take a pledge to the highest aspect of ourselves. And this at the same time is no different from the highest aspect of every sentient being. So we take a vow, or we take a pledge to serve every sentient being. What happens then, as Mr. Judge is pointing out, is there is an occult transition taking place. Our karma becomes intensified. And this is extremely important to be aware of in order not to lose confidence on the path. Because what might have taken, many lifetimes of karma distributed over those lifetimes may not come in a very few lifetimes. So therefore, it's very important to be aware of this occult process. So we don't get discouraged, but on the contrary, we can feel confident that the process is working. So if we then think about the path, it says in the voice of the silent, you cannot walk the path until you have become the path itself. So the path, in one way, is a state of consciousness that we go in and out of, in those very golden moments in our lives where we manage to live unselfishly. We could say that we are in that state, we are on that path. But most of the time, we're probably walking beside the path or trying to find our way back to it. So then we have the help of the virtues. And we should apply here the virtues. And we move now into the third fragment of the voice of the silence, the 7 portals. And there the paramitas, the 7 paramitas are described. And sometimes what we tend to forget is that these paramitas are occult forces, not some forces outside of ourselves, but we have called upon this divine witness of our own most spiritual nature, and the forces of that spiritual nature is now starting to activate itself. So here the occult forces are set in motion. We have 7 portals in front of us, and we are given 7 golden keys. Now, the golden color is almost always represented by the sun, and in this case, probably by the universal intuition, the whisperings of Buddha. Because what we need is to, when we go through this 7 portals one by one, we need to know that we have the discernment of how to use these powers that we are now activating. So we are those golden keys. To the extent that we can raise our consciousness to become, able to discern what is right and wrong in any given situation, we will either use the forces for beneficial reasons or the contrary. So what we are starting when we move into applying the virtues is an alchemical process of purification. And just like the old alchemists, they had this pot and they were boiling stuff, and all the impure metals would come up to the surface. So when we start to practice the paramitas as the occult forces that they are, everything that is counterproductive to the pledge that we have taken will come up to the surface in order to be able for us to look at and to transform, to transform the base metals into the gold. And this is important to know again, because when things are starting to come up, all the impure metals that we may not have been aware of, it's easy to think, how the heck did this happen? I think I'm on a spiritual path, and here all these tendencies in myself that I truly don't like, all sudden, they seem to be taken over. So let's look at those different, virtues. And you see that the heading of them are all in that golden yellow, which represent the discriminative power, the discernment in us. So charity and love immortal can mean so many things. What is charitable is of a loving character in one situation may not be it in another. We also have to remember that each paramita is 7-fold and contains within itself all the others. So just like Jerry was pointing out, the love of the mother for the child is unconditional. The devotion and gratitude that the child feels, the soul in the child feels, is also unconditional. And, that's probably, the highest type of love we can think of on this plane. And then we have to extend that love to the circle of friends in an altogether broadening circle. And what happens when we try to practice this? Well, the moment that we activate one polarity of the paramita, the next one will come up, All the ugly black sides in us will come up to the surface, our anger, And all the notions of wanting to be charitable and have universal love is out the window. And, we may have to be content if we can manage a few moments at a time. If we look at Shila, harmony in thought, word, and act, that gives rise for no further karmic action. If we keep in mind that we actually have intensified our karma, it will come a lot of intensified karma challenges that we have to meet. And so those golden moments when we can have a harmony in thought, word, and act, we all had that experience, some moments, and we feel that there is a flow. And this is important because we don't want to continue to create even more karma. We still have to face all the accumulated karma that is now coming on very heavily, but at the same time, to be mindful of not creating new karma. So there will come up a relationship that really challenging us, and we have to be really mindful so we don't, if these relationships terminate, that we don't walk away in wrath and anger to create further karmic forces, right? So those moments, we know that are really, really blissful moments, golden small moments when we feel that flow. But most of the time, walking the path is something like this, we wiggle here and there, we fall off. And as the voice said, it doesn't matter how many times we fall off. The importance is that we get up again and jump onto the rope again. Shanti is patience sweet that naught can ruffle. And patience, of course, we can all recognize, is the ability to still the mind, to stop the modifications of the mind, to stop the lower mind from running from the past to the future, from likes to dislike, to break those elemental patterns that has shaped our minds for so many incarnations. Of course, the opposite will come, We walk out in the street with all the best intention and someone steps on our toes and we get this reaction that is totally based on our 5 senses. And here we have the point of balance in the paramitas, the 4th one, the middle one, vairagya, equanimity and discernment. And this is one of the most challenging ones. And if we read B.P. Wadhya's comments on the Voice of the Silence, we can see that, this is really where the path actually starts. Because we have to free ourselves from all likes and dislikes, from all pairs of opposites. We don't really want to detach ourselves in the sense that we use, metaphysics in order to stay away from existence, to isolate ourselves, not feel anything. Because of course, we must be able to feel, joy, sorrow, pain, and all those different emotions. Enjoy nature, for example, and everything else. But we shouldn't get caught up in the web of it. We need to know how to let go. And that is one of the most difficult things to do. Because, to let go of something is to let go a little bit of the personality. It's like Jerry said, and we have pointed out in a previous talk, the greatest mantra of all is the mantra, I may be wrong. And to repeat that for oneself helps. And so it is a little bit like this, how do I let go of something that is very familiar and maybe not really serving my purpose any longer? And to let myself, move away from the personal limitations to be able to see a greater beauty in life by expanding my circle of self-identification. As we do that, as we free ourselves from personal desires, the spiritual will, which is the only will there is only spiritual will, but it gets caught up in our different points of identification. So when the spiritual will is free from personal desires, it can roam free upwards. And we are told that there's some type of spiritual enthusiasm that is saying yes to existence, that is saying yes to service, that is saying yes to devotion to the divine, in a very, very simplified manner, like the small child who takes joy in exploring. And when the dust is cleaned off the mirror, when there is perfect concentration, where there is that awareness, then that mirror can reflect back. So when our mind is no longer conditioned by all those lower modifications, it can start to reflect back prajna, or the wisdom of compassion. So then we have cleared away the hindrances that stands in the way for our Buddha nature. Now, another way to look at this, which I would believe that is inspired to a great extent from Mr. Wadia, is to apply the paramitas into the diagram of page 200 of the Secret Doctrine. We know that when the universe is evolving, it evolves, from the most spiritual, it goes all the way down into the deepest matter, and then back up again with an increased wisdom, of course. The same for each of our own pilgrimage. We incarnate here for the purpose of realizing the spiritual goal. And so you can see that one part of that journey is descending into matter. And if you think about, the stories of initiation, for example, in Egypt, where the neophyte or the candidate had to descend into the lower worlds and to help beings in that lower world and then come back up again. Well, that's probably a symbolic way of what we have to do. We need to have dana. We have to be armed with the key of charity and love immortal when we're going down into matter to scrutinize our deepest corner of materiality. We need to have Shila, so we don't create any further karma. We need to have Shanti, so our mind is not modified by all the ugliness that we may find in ourselves as we go through this process of digging up all the dark corners in ourselves. And then Mr. Wadia says that truly the spiritual path actually starts with Vairagya. And I think that is because it is the turning point. Now, this is the balancing point. Can we transcend duality? Can we transcend the pairs of opposite? Can we have that non-attachment so that the spiritual will then can bring us all the way back through dhyana up to prajna again with a fulfilled journey? So one question that we asked ourselves in the group here was, if you are to be reborn, what would be the crucially most important thing that you would like to carry over as a memory? And it was, we talked a lot about it. And one aspect was, if we can only come back with the same flame of devotion and the longing to serve, then we feel confident that the virtues will again present themselves in one shape or the other. Hopefully, if we have studied the archetypal ideas in a non-dogmatic way, we will be able to recognize them in whatever shape we will meet them in the future. And it is important to, remain confident on path, to think that we are never, ever alone. And so I would like to end the talk with this quote from the Voice of the Silence. Please, Joe.
Silence thy thoughts, and fix thy whole attention on thy master, whom yet thou dost not see, but whom thou feelest.
So, thank you.